Shalom, brothers and sisters who are scattered in all corners of the earth. Sanbonan, my name is Mpumelelo. Welcome to this channel. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the subscribers of this channel. Thank you for your support and thank you for all the contributions that you make. If you are new to this channel, please consider to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video, and share it with your friends and family. We continue with the discussion we've been dealing with in the past weeks, revealing the true biblical land of Canaan, the promised land. At this stage, we have established quite a number of facts. Among others, we have established that the River Nile is in the continent of Africa. We have established that the word Nile and the word Gihon are synonymous. Nile is a name invented by the Greeks, whereas Gihon is a name which is used by those who speak Hebrew. So they are synonymous. And they are found in the continent of Africa. You will really look ridiculous if you say Gihon is in Jerusalem in the Jewish state of Israel. Don't say it out loud because people will laugh at you. It's not there, it's in the continent of Africa. We have established that Babylon, all along, Babylon is in the continent of Africa. Why? Babylon was established by Nimrod. He was the first person to build the Tower of Babel. He was the king, and he established many other cities. Nimrod is the son of Cush. Not only the son of Cush, he was the favorite son of Cush. Favorite. In the book of Yasher, where some people say it is fake, but give us evidence if you say it is fake. In the book of Yasher, Ham stole the garments that were made by the Most High for Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, before they died, they gave those garments to Adam in particular, gave his garments to Enoch. Enoch gave them to the grandfather of Noah, Methuselah. Methuselah gave them to Noah, and Noah took those garments to the ark that he built. When the floods subsided, Ham stole those garments, and he took them and gave them to Cush, and Cush gave them to Nimrod. And you can see that these garments were passed over from righteous people, Enoch, Methuselah, Noah, and as soon as they were taken, they were stolen, people began to behave wickedly. Nimrod was a great king. He started off well, worshiping the Most High. But as soon as he had those garments at the age of 20, he started to be powerful and he began to be wicked and he taught people wickedness. They built the Tower of Babel in defiance of what the Most High was telling them. So wickedness started. It didn't start there. It started way before then, but it just continued. It became worse. Nimrod was the son of Cush, and Cush, everybody wants to admit that Cush is here in the continent of Africa. They want to admit that as long as Cush is associated with all black people, and as long as we are told that Ham, the descendants of Ham and the descendants of Cush are cursed people. So they admit that. But then everything else must play out elsewhere, not in the continent. Nimrod suddenly is in Babylon, in Iraq, no longer in the continent, even though they accept that the kingdom of Cush was in the continent of Africa, nowhere else. And they are comfortable to use the word Cush and Ethiopia interchangeably, but they don't want to accept that Nimrod was in the continent of Africa. So we have established that Babylon is here, and Babylon extended from Sudan all the way to West Africa. It was a big kingdom. We have established that our people, when they left Egypt, they did not go northward. They came southward, crossing the river Nile, the Sea of Reeds, as opposed to the Red Sea. So we were deceived, we were misled. They came southward. And Josephus tells us the first place after leaving Egypt was Babylon. But he says where Babylon was built later on or afterwards, he's referring to the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar. All these biblical events happened here in the continent of Africa. At a later stage, I will need to revise a topic that I discussed at some point about the migration of our people. And in my mind, during that time, I still thought that the Middle East was the Jewish state, was Israel, was where Jerusalem was. So we have established that. We have established, okay, so we need to revise that and correct that. Now we have established as well that Onias, a certain high priest, went to Egypt, to Ptolemy, who was the Greek pharaoh at that stage, Ptolemy the IV. He went there and he asked for a piece of land. And he was given a piece of land. He built Jerusalem and the cities resembling the true Jerusalem, which is in the continent. And therefore it makes sense when the Lemba, we have people who have always known that they are Yahudim. Never mind what they believe in today. They have been infiltrated by the Ashkenazi, and they have converted to Judaism. But it makes sense when they say that they left Israel and they went to Yemen and they came all the way to Zimbabwe, where they settled, Mozambique and South Africa. It makes sense because the memory that they have is the memory of their forefathers who joined Onias. There are a lot of priests who went there and joined Onias. So it makes sense. But they did not leave the promised land and went to Yemen and then came back to where they settled in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, and in South Africa. So their story is understandable. And whatever they say, it is from memory, which was passed from parent to parent over generations. And, the bombardment of lies that legitimizes the narratives of everybody, biblical scholars who want to tell us that Middle East is the promised land. That is why the Ashkenazi Jews love the Lemba. They converted them. They've converted them into two groups now, divided them actually, when actually they did not belong to these groups. They are Messianic Jews on one hand, and they are Orthodox Jews. It is very tempting to be converted by these people. They come bearing gifts. So the temptation to follow them is big. Anyways, we've established all of that. We have established that our people came southward, following the path that was followed by our father Abraham. Now we want to back up a bit and review the story of Moses and pick up some of the nuggets that we left behind. We will pick up the story in Exodus 2 when Moses was born. We're not going to talk about the whole thing, but we're focusing on issues that are directing us to where the promised land is. Exodus 2 verse 14. In Exodus 2, Moses is born, and Moses was nursed by his mother, so Moses knew who he was at some stage. As he grew up, he became aware that he's not an Egyptian, but the people who are being enslaved are his people. He became aware. So when he was 40, he went about visiting his brothers, looking at their state of affairs. And he witnessed a horrible situation. An Egyptian slave master or taskmaster was beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. Moses witnessed that, and when he thought he was alone and nobody was looking, he killed that Egyptian and buried him in the sand. Little did he know that people were watching. The following day, he went back there and he saw two Hebrews fighting. And he tried to intervene. He said to them, "What are you doing? Your brethren." And we pick up the story in verse 14. One of them said to him, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" Little did he know that this man that he's talking to is going to be a prince and a judge over him. "Who made you princes and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" So Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known." When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. We know from this story that he met the children of Jethro, and the children of Jethro introduced him to Jethro, and he dwelt with the Midianites. Now, these Midianites, you get an impression, you think that it's a place outside of the continent. Perhaps at some stage they moved out of the continent, but at this stage, there's something interesting about them, or about this man in particular. We are not told he's a Midianite, but he comes from the land of Midian, and he's the priest of Midian. Exodus 3, Moses is settled. He lives in Midian. He lives with Jethro. And by this time, he has married one of the daughters of Jethro, Zipporah. And so, Exodus 3 verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. Now, this Horeb, the mountain of Elohim, is the same. Whenever you see this word mount, the mountain of Elohim, Mount Horeb, it is mentioned many times during the journey from Egypt to the wilderness and then to the promised land. It is mentioned many times. It is synonymous. Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, mountain of Yahweh is the same. It is the same. So, you know, when you read the Bible, they use many words interchangeably. I think the intention was to mix us, to disorient us. We get disoriented. We don't know what they're talking about. You think that Mount Horeb is a mountain somewhere. Mount Sinai is another mountain. The mountain of Elohim is another. It's the same mountain. This mountain, it is not far from where Jethro lived. Moses was tending the flock, and this mountain was just behind the desert. And later on, we will learn that the children of Israel were at Mount Sinai. Now, in Exodus 3, verse 1, we are told that Moses was already established and he was in the desert at Mount Sinai, or Mount Horeb, the mountain of the Most High. Verse 2, and the angel of Yahuwah appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So Moses is drawn towards this bush because he's seeing something very strange. The bush appears to be burning. There's fire, but the bush is not burning. The leaves, the twigs, everything about the bush remains intact, but there's flames of fire in and around it. Let's pick up the story in Exodus 18. Now here I want to demonstrate that Midian, Mount Sinai were not far off. We're in the same place, in the same vicinity. And later on, I will prove where exactly this place is. Not Sudan, not Babylon, not Iraq, not Iran, not anywhere else, but here in the continent. Exodus 18. This is after the children of Israel had escaped from the face of Pharaoh. All of them now. And they are in the wilderness. When Moses left, after he spoke to the Most High in the burning bush, he went back to Egypt to free the children of Yasharel. Jethro, when Moses was in Egypt, at some point he sent away his wife and his children back to his father-in-law. So we join the story now when Jethro brings them back and he comes to meet Moses. Exodus 18 verse 1. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and the father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything Yahuwah had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how Yahuwah had brought Yasharel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And the other was named Eliezer, for he said, my father's Elohim was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he was camped near the mountain of Yahuwah. This is the same mountain where Moses was when he was tendering the flock of Jethro. This is the same mountain. Now Jethro is coming with Moses' wife and his children from Jethro's house or Jethro's dwelling to this mountain where Moses and the children of Yasharel were camping. Mount Horeb, later on known as Mount Sinai. Verse 6. Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. Okay, the story ends here. I want to end it at verse 6, because I want to demonstrate that Jethro was traveling. He was journeying with Moses' son after he heard that they were camping at Mount Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. So Jethro left. He took Moses' wife and his 2 children and brought them to Moses. He was not far. He didn't travel very far. Just like Moses did not travel very far when he was a shepherd. Let's connect the dots. Numbers 12, verse 1. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. You see, they are using many names, many words to refer to the same thing. But it is confusing. Who has ever thought that Ethiopia, as it is mentioned in the Bible, is talking about somebody or people in the continent? Even if you thought about it, you did not make any connection. It did not make sense. So this Zipporah, the wife of Moses, is an Ethiopian woman. She's Ethiopian. She's not mistaken with anything else. They are not even saying she's a Midianite woman. They are saying an Ethiopian woman. Where does she come from? Ethiopia. If the word Ethiopia meant a black person or someone with a dark skin, then Egyptians would have been called Ethiopians. They were dark-skinned. Then the children of Yasharel would have been called Ethiopians. They were dark-skinned, as we are today, with different degrees of darkness. Of course, some are darker than others. Nevertheless, if it referred to that, it would have, all of us would have been called Ethiopians. But it referred, Zipporah was called an Ethiopian or a Cushite woman, as it is written in other versions of the Bible. The American Standard Version, the International, the Amplified Bible, and what is the other one? The New International Version, all of them, they say he was married to a Cushite woman. Why Cushite woman? Cushite woman because she came from the land of Cush, or the kingdom of Cush. That's why. That's why. And why are we giving mixed identities? The priest of Midian, a Cushite woman. Why are we being confused? Now, some people, some rabbis who are in denial, and some biblical scholars, they invented a theory that Moses had 2 wives. One wife was from Midian, and the other one was from Ethiopia. Absolute nonsense, because the same person is brought to Moses by her father, Jethro. So where does it come? Where does this thing come from that he has 2 wives? Again, it's another edition of lies meant to, disorganize us. Zipporah, the wife of Moses, and the place where Moses went after he ran away from Pharaoh was in the continent of Africa, in the kingdom of Cush. It may not have been called the kingdom of Cush. That kingdom had disintegrated by that time, but she was a Cushite woman. Now, we have established that now. If you have a different opinion, please share it. So we move closer to the journey where the children of Israel are about to enter the promised land. Moses has reached his expiry date. He's about to die, and the Most High commands him to go up Mount Nebo and have a view of the promised land, because he's prohibited from entering. Deuteronomy 34. Then Moses, okay, before I go to Deuteronomy 24, what this is telling us, the story of Jethro, his wife Zipporah, the Cushite woman, what this is telling us is that Mount Sinai is not in the Sinai Peninsula. It is not in Egypt. Another myth that, is nonsense. You don't run away from your enemy and run to their backyard. They will kill you. So they went away, further away from Egypt, crossed the river Nile, went to Sinai, which is in the continent of Africa, which was in Ethiopia at that time. It has not moved, by the way. Let me say not in Ethiopia at that time, but Ethiopia has shifted many times. The Ethiopia we see today is not the Ethiopia of different periods. At some stage it was the kingdom of Cush, and at some stage it was called Ethiopia. So we don't know at what point where Midian was in that region, but clearly it was in the kingdom of Cush. So I'm not going to speculate about where Mount Sinai is. That's why I'm now moving to where Moses was standing, in a mountain where the Most High was showing him the promised land. And I think we can identify that mountain. Deuteronomy 34, verse 1. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. So when you are standing in that mountain, you can see Jericho. And Yahuwah showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan. At some point, perhaps in the next episode, we will discuss in detail why we believe certain areas are called by these names, or are these names that are mentioned here. All the Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah or Yehuda as far as the western sea. What is western sea? In Hebrew, or in the language of Hebrew, a sea is yam, a river is yam, an ocean is yam. So what are they talking about here? Is it possibly Lake Victoria? Or is it another ocean nearby? The south and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. Then Yahuwah said to him, this is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. So Moses was given a view of the city, of the promised land, but he was prohibited from proceeding and crossing the river, the river that enabled the children of Israel to inherit the promised land. So we're going to have to establish where this mountain is, or what this mountain is. Let's pick up this story in trying to establish where this mountain is. In Judges 3, verse 12. In Judges 3, you can understand that the children of Israel are already established in the promised land. They are in the promised land. They are ruled by judges. At this point, there are no kings. Judges 3, verse 12. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of Yahuwah. So Yahuwah strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of Yahuwah. Then he gathered to himself the people of Ammon and Amalek, went and defeated Israel, and took possession of the city of palms. The city of palms, we just read that it is Jericho. So the children of Israel served Eglon, king of Moab, 18 years. But when the children of Israel cried out to the Most High raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. By him the children of Israel sent tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Ehud made himself a dagger. It was double-edged and a cubit in length, and fastened it under his clothes on his right thigh. So he brought the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now King Eglon was a very fat man. And when he had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who had carried the tribute. But he himself turned back from the stone images that were at Gilgal. We're going to talk about Gilgal, because these places can still be identified today. Pardon. And said, I have a secret message for you, O king. He said, keep silence. And all who attended him went out from him. We know what happened. If you read the story forward, Ehud, who was the judge, he killed this king who was oppressing the children of Israel. But the point that I want to put across is about the plains of Moab, the place where this king lived. This king was called Eglon. In those plains of Moab, if you remember the story of when the children of Israel were about to enter the promised land, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh asked for permission to dwell in the plains of what is called the River Jordan in the Bible. So that is before they crossed the River Jordan, in the plains of Moab. Now, this place where Moses was standing, in what is called Mount Nebo, is in the plains of Moab. And the king of Moab is called King Eglon. What is interesting now is that there's a very high mountain in the times of Moses, and I don't know until when it was the highest mountain in East Africa. It was higher than Mount Kilimanjaro. This mountain, when you're standing on top of it, you can see the promised land. Not only the first settlement where the children of Israel dwelt, but all the way, all of it, to where we are today. All the south that is mentioned. The south, west, where there's the West Sea, east, where the children of Naphtali, Manasseh, Yehuda, All of it, you could see it. They were 3 million, give or take. But their settlement was such that when they expand, the land will be able to accommodate them. Of course, where we are not sitting according to tribes. There are, if you go to certain places in South Africa, you'll find that there are people who are still living according to their tribes. But those tribes can no longer be matched to what the 12 tribes. Some, especially in the area of Kenya, there are still people who call themselves the house of David. But in the plain of Moab, they had to cross the river which would lead them to the promised land. So Moses was standing up in that mountain. That mountain today is called Mount Elgon. Now, there's just a small change of word here. Instead of Eglon, this king of Moab was Eglon. That mountain is Elgon. When you're standing in that mountain, you can see everything. That mountain is the mountain where Moses was standing. And this mountain is in Uganda. Now, in Uganda today, you should know the story of Moab, how the Moabites and the Ammonites came about. Today, in our language, we would say that they are products of incest because they descend from their own father, Lot. There are some tribes, not only in Uganda, but in some tribes, and I'm not going to mention tribes because I'll be in trouble, but there are some tribes in the continent, in Uganda included, where incest is prevalent. And the chiefs are trying to intervene. Now, at that time, you can justify it whichever way. It is not justifiable. But it is the most disgusting thing, where a father rapes his daughter. You have to have a certain spirit in you to do that, to rape your own flesh and blood. We have a tribe or some tribes in Uganda, in the place where it was the plain of Moab, who is a descendant of incest, where incest is prevalent. And I know people are going to throw stones at me, but it's true. Not that this is isolated. There are incidences of incest, but not as prevalent. There are incidences of incest in other tribes, including here in South Africa. But it is quite prevalent in Uganda. This is not going to make me popular, but it has to be said. And this is where Moses was standing in the plains of Moab, having a view of the promised land. So we are putting pieces together, pieces of the puzzle together. This is where he was. And across that mountain is a river which is 2,000 kilometers in length. This river was called Yoya. And today it's called River Nzoia. It was renamed, I think, by the British Nzoia, because advised that the British could not pronounce Yoya, so they renamed it Nzoia. This river is the river that our forefathers crossed into the promised land. Now, there are people who claim that the river Jordan is the Orange River in South Africa. That is not possible. If you look at, they are deep in the Promised Land. They did not need to cross the river into the Promised Land. And the Orange River is very far. It is very far. This is the river they crossed. The River Nzoia, River Yoya. And they went into the Promised Land. This is where they first settled. This is where Jerusalem was built. Jerusalem, the city of Yahuwah, is in Mount Kenya. And we will discuss in detail. Yah willing, we should be able to put together a documentary. And we should be able to visit those places, all of them, and recreate our own exodus and recreate our own vision of what the Bible is talking about. Not the interpretation of other people who are foreigners to us, who are telling us our own stories. This is our story. If we mess it up, we mess it up. This time we are not listening to people telling us who we are. We were given all sorts of names. We define ourselves now. It is us who are going to tell our own story, not other people. So this is it for now. This is it. Our people journeyed all the way and they first settled in Kenya. Interestingly, the word Canaan, when it is spelled, when it is written in this Hebrew language, it's Canaan. Canaan, not Canaan, Canaan, which is close to Kenya. But we want to talk about the culture of the peoples, the languages, and how I believe that this Hebrew was created from the languages our people speak. Today we speak dialects of, even Swahili has evolved. So you would have ancient Swahili, and you would have certain tribes, in Kenya in particular, who still speak with ancient Swahili. And they can identify these Hebrew words. What is interesting is that the meaning is different. The meaning is different. So we shouldn't be fighting about the meaning and pronunciation of Hebrew, because we should wait a minute, because we will find out that this is not even the language of the Bible. Because all these things were hoarded by the Ashkenazi Jews, because they call them Jewish scriptures. It was them who made all these translations. And today we are reading from their mindset. Just like we are reading everything else, it's from the mindset of white people who have no interest in our well-being. And so this needs to be corrected. I rest my case. We will continue next time and look at various places that are mentioned in the Promised Land, in the land of milk and honey. I don't care what the Promised Land looks like today. You can call us wicked, you can call us all sorts of names, but we are in the Promised Land. Many people from the diaspora, they come to the continent and they actually go to Babylon and they think they're in the motherland. And they are treated very badly. And I'm not saying here in Southern Africa you won't be treated badly, because there are also bad people here, even among us. There's always been bad people, but it is worse when you are a descendant of Abraham and you go back to Babylon, there are many stories that have been told of people who were killed. They were literally killed. They were robbed of their assets, their investments. They were robbed and they were left destitute. They were in Babylon and they did not know it. It is a tendency among us, the children of Israel, to go back to our slave masters. Those who oppressed us in the continent, as soon as we have money, we go back to England to live there. How do you live in a place of people who oppressed you? Our second president, who is regarded as the most intelligent, when he was in exile, President Thabo Mbeki, he was schooled by the British, preparing him to be the next president in South Africa. He was schooled by the colonizers. And we can see it, that as long as we use the systems of these people, as long as we're educated by them, as long as we use their technology, we're still colonized, we're still enslaved, we're still oppressed. We will not move forward until we correct these things. A wise man, I read a message today of someone wise, and he said, as long as we are still ruled by the systems of white people, using their education system, using their political system, dressing up like them, reading their literature, our minds are not free. But until we are ruled by kings and queens, and above all, ruled according to the law of our Elohim, then we can say we are free. Until we are gathered, until we are brought together as a nation, until we are ruled by a king. Until then, we must not claim that we are free. We are not. In Portuguese, this language is used in Mozambique. I got to learn it. Mozambique and Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, they say, "A luta continua." The struggle continues. All praises to the Most High. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.